Hello and welcome to Good Evening Britain, a Force for Good's weekly show coming to you live from our studios here in the heart of the great British city of Glasgow, with me, your host, Alistair McConnachie. We are broadcasting on all our digital platforms throughout the United Kingdom and across the world. We're bringing you quality pro-UK comment and analysis every Wednesday from 7 until 8 p.m. on Facebook, on YouTube, on X, and also on TikTok. Folks, please do send in your greetings. Tell us where you are watching from on this rather blustery and rainy December evening here in our wonderful United Kingdom. And even if you're watching from the rest of the world, tell us where you're watching from too, because we love to hear from you. Now, folks, another packed show as always. And at the bottom of the hour at 7:30, we will be welcoming back Niall Fraser of the Niall Fraser Show, who attended the Reform UK Party Conference in Scotland in Perth on Saturday just gone, and he's going to be telling us all about that, telling us all about the buzz that was there, giving us his impressions of that day, a day which I have to say has also panicked the Scottish political and media establishment, because they are very worried about Reform UK and its ability to actually represent people in Scotland in a way that the establishment, SNP, Greens, Lib Dems, Tories and Labour have not hitherto been able to do on a certain number of key issues. And we all know those sorts of issues that Reform are making their own and which are going to get a lot of votes in the 2026 Scottish Holyrood election. And how many votes are they going to get? That's my question to you. And it was partially answered today by Professor John Curtice in the national newspaper that ran with this headline at the top of their newspaper. Exclusive. Curtice: Reform UK on track for 2 MSPs in Scotland's biggest city. In other words, Glasgow. 2 MSPs in Glasgow alone. And if they get 2 MSPs in Glasgow alone, that would be them on track for, well, Glasgow is one of the Scottish regions. And there are 8 Scottish regions. And if they got 2 in the Glasgow region, does that mean they're going to get like about 16 in Scotland as a whole? Wow, that would be amazing. That would be amazing. And it would lead to the wipeout of the Scottish Cabbage Party. The soggy Greens, they would be gone. And indeed, if they got 2 MSPs in Glasgow, if Reform got 2 MSPs in Glasgow, that would probably kick out Patrick Harvey, who is the Green regional MSP in Glasgow. So, wow, what a reason to get involved, shall we say, at the Holyrood election in 2026. Greens be gone at the hand of Reform UK. Wouldn't that be amazing? Well, we'll be talking about the possibility of that with our friend Niall Fraser at the bottom of the hour. And many of you know Niall. He's always got a lot to say on these matters, and we always want to take note of what he has got to say on these particular things. Folks, do send in your comments and your greetings. Who was first in tonight? It was Debbie, who says, "Good evening, everyone," and good evening to you, Debbie. Did you find the cat? Please do tell us, because I know that was a concern last week. Debbie says, "I hope everyone is doing well. Not long until Christmas. I see a lot of cons in today's budget, trying to vote for the con artists. No, let's get them out by 2026. Absolutely. Melissa says, hope you are well, with a Reform UK sticker. Hope you are well too, Melissa. Paul says, good evening from Kent. Hi to Freaky and to James, who's watching from Leeds, great British city of Leeds. World Fun says, UK, a force for good is always amazing. Well, thank you for that. We do our very best. And to TC, hi. Exiled Viking says he's being persecuted by the authorities. Well, that's not so good. I hope that gets resolved. Catherine is watching from Seal. Do many people know where Seal is without looking at an atlas? Richard says, nice one. Well wishes from Northumberland. The National, we read it so that you don't have to, as Paul says. I think we're the only person that buys it as well, certainly in the local supermarket. I think they must all think that's that Scottish nationalist coming in again. He's always buying that newspaper. Maureen says the Reform leader in Scotland is a nationalist and was an SNP MSP. Well, I know that used to be the case. I don't know if it's still the case. I know that they're having various reshuffles and things like that. And I know that Reform is also, and maybe we'll talk about this with Niall, but it is quite a big tent, as they say. And so there will be quite a few, well, maybe not quite a few, I don't know. I'm just saying there may be a few disenchanted Scottish nationalists who have seen the light and who want to join Reform. We'll ask Niall if there were any at the conference without him having to name names. Debbie says the cat turned up 28 hours later. Well, I'm glad to hear it. I'm glad to hear it. It just went on a wee adventure, it seems. Henrique says Britain needs reform, doesn't it? Absolutely. Absolutely. Exiled Viking is going to fill us in with the details. Okay, well, I hope you get it sorted, sir. All right, to Anthony, great British activist over on the other side of the country. And in 2026, there's going to be quite a few SNP MSPs looking for a new job, says Factions Guru. I just want to mention, we had a viewer last week who sent a super chat. D-Tube sent a super chat, and I omitted to read it out. So if you're watching, my apologies for that. My apologies, because people who send super chats usually comes up here. It did come up. I omitted to read it out, and I apologize for that. But please don't let it stop you. Please don't let it put you off sending more super chats. It was very much appreciated. And shout out to anybody who gives a super chat. If you're watching on YouTube, you can do that by just clicking on the little dollar sign just below the screen here. Good. Well, what shall we talk about before Niall comes on? Something I want to talk about is, let's see, got so much to talk about really today. Where's my notes? Where do we start? Well, let's start with Keir Starmer and hopefully finish with him fairly shortly. But he did quite an extraordinary speech a few days ago, wherein he said, and we're just about to play it actually. Let's play what he said. Let's play what he said, and let's then talk about it.
Because a failure on this scale isn't just bad luck. It isn't a global trend or taking your eye off the ball. No, this is a different order of failure. This happened by design, not accident. Policies were reformed deliberately to liberalise immigration. Brexit was used for that purpose, to turn Britain into a one-nation experiment in open borders. global Britain.
Goodness me, that's extraordinary. If you had said that even at the beginning of the year, well, certainly if you had said that a couple of years ago before Elon Musk took over Twitter, you'd probably have got your account suspended for suggesting that there was some kind of experiment going on, as if there was almost like a conspiracy. Let's just read out what he said again. He said, "What the British people are owed is an explanation. Because a failure," and he's talking, of course, about the mass immigration failure, "on this scale isn't just bad luck. It isn't a global trend or taking your eye off the ball. No, this is a different order of failure. This happened by design, not accident. Policies were reformed deliberately to liberalise immigration. Brexit was used for that purpose, to turn Britain into a one-nation experiment in open borders." What an amazing line to hear from somebody of his stature, the Prime Minister. The policy was to turn Britain into a one-nation experiment in open borders. Global Britain, remember that slogan? That's what they meant. A policy with no support, of which they then pretended wasn't happening. A policy with no support, of which they pretended wasn't happening. Now, put aside what you may think of Keir Starmer and put aside his own credibility in the matter, which is not high at all, and put aside the fact that he probably maybe doesn't want to do very much about it as far as his philosophy of internationalism is concerned. Nevertheless, that's an amazing thing that he said. He basically admitted that mass immigration has been one giant experiment and that it commands no support. And the government of the day, by which he's referring to the Conservatives, pretended it wasn't happening. Amazing that he's done that. And the good thing for us that he's done that is he's shifted debate. He's shifted permissible debate in our direction. You see, this is the importance of politicians. People say, oh, you get one man into Parliament, what difference does it make? Well, if that person can shift debate in a certain direction, then it can have a huge impact. And well, that's the Prime Minister talking about these things, which means that we, the humble peons of Britain, can most certainly talk about these things now. And we can certainly talk about how this is an experiment and how it's got no support, how it's a complete, that it didn't happen by accident. It, to quote Keir Starmer, happened by design. Happened by design. So he really helped shift debate our way, which is an extremely good thing that he's done, if he hasn't done very much else around this particular matter. And I think he went on in a very short speech, actually, to talk about how his intention was to get more British citizens into work in order that presumably they didn't have to import people to do the jobs. Because as we've been saying on this program for months now, they're importing all of these people, claiming that they're to fill vacancies. And what they don't point out is that the more people you import, then the more vacancies occur, because these people need products and services. And so a bigger population just increases the number of vacancies. If you just put a complete halt on it and then say, right, how many people have we got in the country and can we find jobs for them? Then you'll be able to work it out. But just having a policy of open borders and people coming in all the time in huge numbers, all that does is it just bloats the economy way up, and there's always vacancies, usually at the lower end of the scale, usually at the lower end jobs. Anyway, we're talking all about that in our new book, Volume 2 of A Big Book for the Union, which we were hoping to get out for Christmas, which we may still get out for Christmas, but one way or the other, we're going to get it out. in short order. And it's going to be a cracker because there's so much to say, and we've got a good way of saying it. We can put it down in very concise and but nevertheless comprehensive and coherent words, which are so necessary, and hopefully will be able to help the politicians moving forward. Because if there's one thing that the MSPs, as presently constituted, don't want to do, is talk about mass immigration. They don't want to talk about that. And that's why we cannot have the same type of parliament elected again in 2026. There has to be fresh blood in there who are not afraid to talk about these issues, because, and we're going to mention this in our book, Scotland is in a very vulnerable position right now. We're very much like the Republic of Ireland, which is we have an entire political class and an entire media class that want mass immigration, or at least are not opposed to it in any way on any kind of philosophical basis. An entire media and political class that are essentially internationalists who want open borders, who would never in the light of ever speak against it and say we need to stop it and we need to send these people home. We have nobody in political power in Scotland who say that, and the Republic of Ireland similarly. So what you saw was the powers behind the scenes knew they could flood the Republic of Ireland with huge numbers of immigrants because there would be no political voice to speak out against it. And the Republic of Ireland had the general election last week, and the pro-Irish voices unfortunately didn't really get elected. The great mass of people in the Republic just voted for the same old, and will continue to get, unfortunately, that. So things will change. I mean, the Irish nationalist types, for want of a better expression these days, they got votes and they may grow, but they haven't got anybody into the dial. Whereas here in Scotland, we do have the opportunity of getting outspoken immigration restrictionists, immigration limitationists into Holyrood, so that if Scotland, its rural areas in particularly, get overwhelmed by huge numbers of immigrants, then at least there'll be people who will be able to speak out against it. So we have to hope that that's going to be the case, because believe me, not a single Labour or SNP or Lib Dem will speak out against this in Scotland. Perhaps some of the Tories might, but they're not really strong enough to do that. You need a whole new set of people coming in. You need a whole new broom before you're going to get the voices in Scotland who will speak up to defend Scotland from being transformed by mass immigration. And these voices are beginning slowly to coalesce and come together, probably just about the right time as well. We'll touch on some of these things with our guest at the bottom of the hour, who is Niall Fraser, who will be reporting back fresh from the Reform Party conference in Perth on Saturday. Stephen says, yes, I don't know. That's a good point, Stephen. When I said Irish nationalists, I wasn't meaning the Sinn Féiners. Actually, I was meaning the people who want to keep the Republic of Ireland Irish. So I don't know what you would call them these days. In the old days, you could call them nationalists, but today the Irish nationalists, as in the Sinn Féiners, are just internationalists. They're not like Irish patriots anymore. They'll tell you they are, and that Irish patriotism means that the brotherhood of man can come and live in the Republic of Ireland. We touched on that last week. Catherine says, bad weather in Seal. I'm not surprised, right out there in the windy ocean. Christopher says the establishment has betrayed the British people. They are diametrically opposed to our interests. We need to get the politicians out and the economic migrants out of our country and deported. I'm with you on that one. Blue Bear says he got his prize last week and it's better than he thought. I'm glad that you got it, sir, and we were pleased to send it to you. We will have a competition coming up in a few minutes, and to enter it, all you need to do is to send an email to contact@aforceforgood.uk, and you could win a couple of badges, a couple of Union Jack badges, button badges. Why can I never do that? There you go. Couple of Union Jack button badges, 1970s style. Remember them? Button badges were all the rage when I was growing up. Factions wonders if Scotland is super left wing. I would question that. I think we have a lot of left wing parties, but we have a lot of small c conservative minded people. What we do have is a very much leftist media system, and they set the trend in Scotland. They keep everybody in line. Your Daily Records, your STVs, your Glasgow Heralds, your Scottish Nationalists, your Scotsmans. They're all lefty in the sense of being against Trump, being against Brexit, being for mass immigration into Scotland, you know. But the actual people of Scotland, I wouldn't say that they were super left-wing. Remember, it's a fairly small population in Scotland as well. Far more people in London than there are even in Scotland, yeah. And it's quite a diverse political culture, you could say. Diverse philosophically, that is. And, well, there you go, because Reform are doing well in Scotland. It is perhaps a reaction to not having these voices heard for so long. And you just know the media are not going to, the media are just going to pretend it didn't happen. I remember that at Brexit, the Scottish media were livid, utterly livid about it. And they just went on as if, no, we've still got to stay in the EU. And then when Trump was elected, the Scottish media went into meltdown and just denied it for 4 years, basically. And if Reform get elected, if they get candidates elected, a significant number elected, the Scottish media, again, will just go into a conniption fit and rage against it and try to pretend that these people don't exist and hope that they go away 4 years later, 5 years later. And Reform has to be aware of that. I'm sure it will be. Yeah. Christopher says, the media are complicit in our decline as a country, at least in Scotland. Indeed, other complicit groups include NGOs and the public sector. That's so true. And this is one of the reasons why we need to get new voices into Holyrood, because some people will say, oh, don't you know Holyrood has got no control over mass immigration? That's all decided at Westminster. Well, those policies are indeed decided at Westminster, but what Holyrood does have control over is the money that goes to the pro-immigration NGOs. It has control over the Holyrood money that goes to the pro-immigration charities. It has control over the legal aid that goes to the lawyers in order to represent the so-called asylum seekers and other elements of immigration law. So a cohort of patriotic Reform candidates could make a fuss about that and try to get that kind of money restricted or ideally stopped from going to the NGOs, from going to these pro mass immigration charities from going to the lawyers who represent all of these fraudulent asylum seekers. And sure, that's going to kick up a fuss, but wouldn't that be a great thing for them to do, and to kick up a fuss about that and get everybody talking about that? They could definitely do that, because mass immigration in Scotland, while it's supported by while it's supported by the MSPs, it's nevertheless held up by the NGOs and the charities in Scotland, the so-called third sector, the invasion migration sector, that's funded by Holyrood. So take away that funding and you're going to help fight the immigration limitation cause. What do folk think about that phrase, immigration limitation? It's got a nice rhyme to it, because I'm writing this book at the moment and I'm trying to think up snappy phrases to describe our side. Sure, we're against mass immigration. We're the immigration restriction movement. We're immigration restrictionists. It's not a bad phrase. We're immigration limitationists. The immigration limitation movement. Anyway, so much we can play with there. We've got our guest coming on in 3 or 4 minutes. Before then, I want to do On This Day in British History. And folks, afterwards, I'll ask you a question and send your answer by email to contact@aforceforgood.uk. And you could win 2 button badges, a big one and a little one, to wear with pride. Good stuff. Okay, on this day in British history, today was the day in 1930. I'm going to say 1937. Let me check my notes. Yes, 4th of December 1937, one of the best-selling comics in the UK ever, The Dandy, was launched. And it was launched by the well-known publishing house DC Thomson from the great British city of Dundee. And the front page was a Corky the cat, a Corky the cat story. Let's see if we've got a pic of it here. There we go. Corky the cat. That's the front page of the Dandy back in 1937. No speech bubbles in that, but the comic was to distinguish itself from other comics at the time by having speech bubbles instead of the text written out in captions below the frames. And it ran for 75 years exactly until the 4th of December 2012. And at its peak, it was selling 2 million copies, 2 million comics a week in its peak in the 1950s. So crying out loud, I mean, what a successful magazine to be turning that kind of thing around every week. Incredible. But by the time 2012 came around, of course, lots of other changes in society, including television and mobile phones and so on, meant that its readership had fallen just to a few thousand. And so they brought it to an end on the 4th of December 2012 after 75 years. But they still publish online, and they still publish a summer special, and they still publish a yearly Christmas album, and that's the annual, I should say, a Christmas annual. That's the annual for 2024. So some of you got young children. There's a Christmas idea for you. Good. We are going just to give our man Niall 2 or 3 minutes. He's having technological difficulties at his end, but when he's sorted, we'll get him again. Well, basically, yes, Scotland did invent the comic in that sense, and DC Thomson, shall we say, they were a huge publisher of comics all through the 20th century. What does this button do? Says, demonstrated quality artwork like Benny Hill was successful because his expressions were understood worldwide. So when our man Niall is ready to get us, he can send us a message there. All working now, he says. Folks, please do welcome our guest. Now, my question to you, send your answer to contact@aforceforgood.uk. The Dandy was launched on this day. From which great British city does it hail? Good, good. Now, let's say hello to Niall. Folks, if you're watching on TikTok, you won't see this interview, I'm afraid, because it's on the computer over here.
Hello, Alistair.
Good evening, Niall.
How are you doing?
Good. I'm doing very well. Doing very well, thanks. Well, so glad to have you on for a second week running, because you were at the Reform Party conference last Saturday, and I know a lot of people will want to know just how that went and what the speeches were about and all that kind of thing. And before we get into that, I just want to throw up a couple of pictures here of the conference so people get an idea in their head what we are talking about. Now, there's a fairly packed room.
Mm-hmm.
Who's the fellow who's speaking there?
That looks like Martin Green.
And what's his role?
Martin Green's the national organiser for Scotland for Reform.
Right.
Mm-hmm.
Right. And here's
so
another...
he's been in the trenches. That is Martin Green. So he's been in the trenches for about 4 years now.
Right.
Mm-hmm.
Good. Oh, well, it's good to hear that they have got a national organiser, at least for up here. I mean, that looked pretty packed, that room. Yeah. I mean, was it standing room only or something?
Well, you couldn't have fit anybody else in, Alistair. I think by the time we showed up, it was standing room only. And to their credit, when they started, they said anybody that's willing to stand and give somebody else who's maybe not as able-bodied as them a seat, please do. And, you know, at least 10 or 15% of the audience members got up and relinquished their seat to somebody who's maybe a bit older or yeah, it was fantastic. I mean, it was it was absolutely jam-packed, Alistair. It was packed to the point of uncomfortable. But that's not to say it's a bad thing. It just means to say that they're so popular that they've outgrown their venue already.
Outgrown it before they had even started.
Yes.
Basically.
Well, they've used that venue before for things as well. So, I mean, they've got history to use that venue. And, you know, at the dinner afterward, they were saying we used this dinner room, you know, a few years back. There was only 15 people in it. This time there was easily 70 or 80 people getting a dinner. And, I mean, for the numbers, purely numbers-wise, that hotel must have had, I don't know, 300 people in it at a political conference. On a Saturday in Perth, which isn't the easiest place to get to if most people are central belt, you know, clustered and stuff. So it's it was really, really optimistic in terms of just pure numbers.
Paul here asks, were there any people picketing the conference? Because I know that the usual suspects here in Glasgow were all like, we're all going to go to Perth and make a big fuss. And I thought, I doubt they'll get anybody, but was there anybody standing about doing anything when you went in?
I mean, no, when we walked in. So when the actual conference, the last entry was 1 p.m. Went from 1 till 5. The actual protest itself kicked off the back of 4. 4:30 to 6 or something like that. So it's people that are leaving the conference and or coming for the dinner. But I said to myself, they're not going to get the numbers for this. In terms of the protest, they just weren't going to be able to get the numbers, and I was spot on. I think they must have had 30 people at best. But they made themselves heard. They had big sound equipment that was, it was actually quite shocking how loud they were allowed to have the sound equipment. But they had police there. The easiest thing to police in the world. There must have been 3 or 4 police guys just keeping an eye on them. But it was pitiful, Alistair, to say.
Mm-hmm. Well, does no harm in the sense that it brings attention to you and to your organisation, and people passing by will go, oh, who's in there? And they'll go, oh, it's all these right-wingers that want to stop immigration. And the locals will go, brilliant, brilliant. Exactly. I'm for that. Mm-hmm. So it does you no harm at all. And it gives them something to do in their otherwise uneventful lives.
Yeah.
So, yeah. So we have the speakers list here, which we'll stick up, and maybe you can, let's see, get rid of that at the bottom there. Martin Green, welcome to conference. Ewan Stewart, make the UK prosperous again. What was his solution to that? Can you recall?
I can't honestly. I can't recall. I was too busy being uncomfortable. Honestly, to be fair, a lot of people had good things to say about making the, in terms of the speakers and that. But I was too uncomfortable to sit through all these different speeches. It really was.
Stand through. You mean stand through? Standing
through them. Sorry.
Yes.
I wasn't just the standing as well. I mean, the amount of bodies in the room, it was absolutely stifling as well. So wow. on top of being, uncomfortable standing all the time, you were getting blasted by just this intense heat. So it was really quite stifling. I thought, the speakers. I mean, we've seen the first half and the last half. And Martin Green done a great job sort of starting it all up, kicking the show off. I just sort of filling the room with optimism and stuff like that, sort of hype man for reform. And then at the end, I thought Richard Tice was actually fantastic. He's the sort of he was a polished article as Richard Tice. He was really well spoken, and to his credit, he stood and answered, must have been 10 or 15 questions after. He'd done a live Q&A. It wasn't really slated, but there was extra time, and so he just stood and asked questions of every single sort of nature, right across this political spectrum. It was great. And it was good to hear him just answer so candidly and honestly, But overall, I think the conference was fantastic. It was a bit of a shame that you wouldn't be we had to miss large portions of it just purely by being uncomfortable.
Sure.
There was even it's the first time I've seen this at any venue, but once a person done a speech, they then went to another room and done the same speech again for people who it was like an overflow room, Alistair. So they were in the main room, they'd done their thing, and then once they'd done that, they walked to another room, and then they'd done it all again for other people in an overflow room. So it's the first time I've ever seen that. But yeah, it was fantastic, despite all its sort of the teething problems, just by the size of the venue. I mean, it just goes to show you the sort of popularity that reform has got, the momentum that reform has got, that, they're filling out places. They're going to have to need, I would say, 600 to 1,000 for their next one, minimum, to make it comfortable for everyone. It has to be like 1,000 seater, I think. And I think they'd easily sell the tickets. If they'd done somewhere in the central belt, they would easily sell 1,000 tickets.
That's interesting for you to say, and you couldn't say that about really any other party. in Scotland at this precise moment.
No,
1,000 people, you couldn't get that. But it may well happen, because, as they're saying, all the momentum is with reform. And it's a good point at which to bring up this lead story in today's National, which I read so that you don't have to. The polling expert, John Curtice, says Reform UK on track for 2 MSPs in Scotland's biggest city, by which he means Glasgow. Which, for those of you who don't know, at the Scottish elections, everybody gets 2 votes. The first vote is for your local constituency MSP, which is first past the post. And the second vote is for your regional MSP. And Scotland is divided into 8 regions, one of which is Glasgow, and each region has 7 MSPs to be elected. And the voting on the regional list is by proportional representation, and it's through the proportional representation route that you get, for example, the Greens get elected, and some other unusual groups get elected. And it's through the regional vote that Reform is going to be hoping to be elected next in about 16 months' time, or thereabouts, in May 2026. And so here's the article. Curtice, Reform UK very likely to gain 2 Holyrood seats in Glasgow. So of the 8 regions, if he gets 2 in Glasgow, 2 times 8, that's like 16 MSPs. There's 129 MSPs, but 16 or even 8, even if they got one in every region. I mean, do you think this is likely?
I think, to be conservative, I mean, just looking at, I think they'll guarantee 1 in every region, I believe. They have to run people in the constituencies, and they have to encourage people to vote in the constituencies, even though I can guarantee, I see the tactical voting manual being constructed in the background as we speak, Alistair. But I mean, at this point in time, they're going to have to run people in the constituencies, and they'll get quite a lot of votes in the constituencies as well. But in terms of the list, they'll get minimum 1 in every region, and I believe they'll get 2 in certain regions. They might even get 2 across all regions, which would make 16. So I think maybe 16 is the top end and 8's the bottom end, if we want to be quite a wide dispersion. But if you're saying 2 in Glasgow alone, I think we're looking really good. Reform, I mean, I see the sort of negativity brought towards Reform as well. I'm very conscious of that, and nothing's perfect, but it's this, it's such a credible opportunity to get working class people in the Scottish Parliament. It's such an opportunity to change Scotland for the better. It really is. I don't think we're going to get a better opportunity this. Flawed as it may be, it is flawed as people think it may be. It's very, very. It's such an incredible opportunity that we need to take it, and we need to back Reform.
Absolutely, and it has to happen, because, as I was saying earlier in the programme, we do not want to end up in the situation of the Republic of Ireland, where they have got nobody who will speak up for them on the critical matter of mass immigration. And I don't think Reform should beat around the bush about this. People are not going to be voting Reform because they think Reform are going to make the buses run on time, or because of any other of these policies. They're going to be voting Reform as a backlash to the levels of mass immigration especially into the Central Belt, and that, which is so obvious now. And so Reform really have to play up that particular angle, because that's where their votes are really going to come from, heavily across all the parties as well. It's going to come. I think it would be a mistake for Reform to imagine, we can turn ourselves into Tory light or Tory hard or whatever. I think they should just see themselves as a completely new party, appealing across the board to as many different people as possible on basically a patriotic position, with a heavy emphasis on immigration limitation. That would be my advice if anybody's listening. But what's your thoughts on that?
They need to sort of laser focus their messaging. If you can bring up the picture again, and see the sort of three words. I think it was family, community, and something else. But I mean, they need to be staunch anti-immigration. So it's just behind Martin Green there, but on this big, huge poster thing, there was
his head's hiding it. Yeah.
So they need to be staunch anti-immigration first and foremost. They need to bring the numbers down. Everyone's concerned about immigration, whether it's affected where they stay or not at this point in time. We need. There was a firm sort of anti-indoctrination in the education system as well. So it's interesting that pops up almost everywhere I go. It's in every sort of new emerging party that they need to kill off this rainbow indoctrination that's happening in the schools. And everyone's when we first started talking about this stuff 4 or 5 years ago, it was very fringe. Nobody knew exactly what was happening in the schools. Nobody knew the extent of what was happening in the schools. But now this ideology has come mainstream now, and Reform is fighting back against that, which is critical that a mainstream party picks up this mantle and goes not only anti-immigration but anti-rainbow indoctrination. They need this. They need to be pro-economy. They need to kill off net zero. So net zero is it's like if you think of the world in general, some countries are allowed to just build as many coal power plants as they want, pollute as much as they want, and then artificially we're picking winners and losers in the world economy by imposing these net zero standards on, say, Western economies like ours, where we're not allowed to pollute. We're not allowed. We've got this sort of artificial economic stop, whereas other countries are allowed to just go gangbusters on oil, on coal, or whatever it is, on fossil fuels, and yet we've got a hard stop. It makes no sense to sort of
it would be absolutely
stem our economy like that. So they'd be anti-net zero, and net zero does need to come to an end for Britain to flourish. They need to be anti-rainbow indoctrination in schools, and they need to be anti-immigration, especially anti-mass immigration. But even the net immigration needs to be curbed as well. So this is your three main points that needs to be hammered home everywhere they go, every doorstep they go, and they will win. If they keep hammering home that message, they could surpass the 16 seats that they're, the 8 to 16 seats. They can go 20 if they really wanted.
Absolutely. It would be
amazing. What I'm hearing is true. Sorry to cut you off. I mean, if what I'm hearing is true, and they've got quite a large campaign fund to work with, they can really, really push for a huge number of MSPs in the Scottish Parliament that will act as a sort of a stop on all these very far left parties, the SNP, Labour, and halt all these lunatic policies that are emanating out of the Scottish Parliament. So I look forward to that day coming. It can't come, quick enough. And if this emergency budget doesn't come through, in Scotland, we could be looking at a very, very quick election.
I know. I hadn't thought about that. I hope that it does go through, because I think you guys need time to get your feet. Really, I don't know if you would be ready for something very quickly like this. You do need the next year to build up. Now, I notice there's one or two people in the comments here asking about who is standing and who's standing where, and is such a person going to stand or whatever. Is there? I would imagine none of that's been chosen yet. What's happening?
So, as far as I'm aware, I don't know exactly who's standing. I see David Kirkwood's name brought up, Joe standing. I mean, the thing with David Kirkwood, the Tories are going to be using his video of the fact they would vote for another referendum as an attack video, because I mean, the Scottish Tories face annihilation in this next election. This is the truth. And I think, you know, just by the conversations I'm having with people at the conference, I met a young farmer, you know, he must have been 22, 23, young guy, and him and all his friends, his farmer friends, are voting Reform. They don't see anyone else sticking up for them, even to the point where a lot of farmers are coming to Scottish, you know, the Reform conference, whereas generally they'll be quite standoffish. I don't know who's standing. I think it's May Doonan that's asking the question. I don't know. I don't know if people have been selected yet. But I can imagine these names will be in the mix at the very least.
Well, you mentioned there about knocking out the Tories, and I think that's almost certain, because just quoting now from the article in today's National, based on an average of opinion polls which put Reform on 11% in Scotland, Curtice said this would be enough for them to win 2 seats in Glasgow. The Greens currently have 1 seat in the city. In the Glasgow region, there's 7 regional MSPs, and of the 7 at the moment, there's 4 Labour, 2 Tory, and 1 Green, and the Green is Patrick Harvey. And it goes on here, and this is just the National talking. If this was borne out in an election, it would be a bombshell moment for Scottish politics and a blow to Glasgow's self-image and reputation as a progressive city.
Joke. Unbelievable. I mean, I just considering we were at one of the largest rallies, the largest political events that's probably ever happened in George Square. We know the true extent of Glasgow's you know, anti-immigration sentiment. We know it, Alistair.
Oh, yeah.
We can feel it in the air when we're walking around. So it's not a blow to their self-image. If anything, it's encouraging to see right-wing politicians, and generally they're not even that right-wing. You know what I mean? This is a conversation that was having across this this conference as well. You know, the right-wing. You know, there's still parties that are further right-wing than Reform. You know, if you want to go super right-wing, of course they exist. But the Reform aren't going to, you know, I don't think people are going to go that far. You see what I'm saying? It's they're just right off centre. They're nothing more than that.
Yeah, the idea of Glasgow being some kind of progressive place, that's just a myth that's created by the media, by the Glasgow media, by the Daily Record and by the Glasgow Herald, and by the people who tend to dominate the lovey scene, as it were, in Glasgow. And that's always been what they like to say, but it's not. That's just the way that they've tried to frame and fashion everything. And I mean, as you just said there, Glasgow, well, it depends what you mean by progressive. I happen to think that there's a very progressive case for ending mass immigration. I happen to think that you can make a very clear argument from, if you like, a leftist perspective to end mass immigration on the basis of national sovereignty, and on the basis of the right of the workers of one country to be protected within their country, to have a national economy that's theirs, that doesn't belong to the world, and to have safety and security and stability. And you could make and I do and will in this book make what you might call a leftist case for ending mass immigration. And it can certainly be made. You just won't get any of the lovies in the modern society today making it. You won't even get the so-called left-wing parties like the Scottish Socialist Party making it, because they've just given in to internationalism and to the destruction of the nation state, which is the only political vehicle that can really protect the working class at the end of the day. Anyway, enough of that. Russell Findlay here, Reform's rise will help the SNP in 2026. And he's obviously worried that you're going to be taking votes from his party. However, quoting the National here, in a direct challenge to Scottish Tory leader Russell Findlay, who earlier this week claimed a vote for Reform would aid the SNP, Curtice said voting Conservative would be a wasted vote.
Certainly.
Quote, wasted vote. He said, quote, The bad news for Mr. Findlay is that given the current polls, the Conservatives are just not going to get represented in Glasgow. They're too far behind. I'm afraid the riposte would be, in Glasgow at least, it looks like a Conservative vote would be a wasted vote. You need to get this on your leaflets, by the way.
I see another question there aimed at Nats are saying that you'll only split the unionist vote, and that just dovetails into exactly what Russell Findlay is saying here. The thing is, he has to say that for the sake of his own party, for the sake of his own job and the jobs of the people that are under his in the Tories, basically. There's no the thing is, Reform will end up with more MSPs than the Tories. That's what it's going to end up like. So it's no Reform splitting the unionist vote. It's the Tories splitting the unionist vote. That's more closer to the truth than anything else. If the Tories do get a handful of MSPs, I reckon Reform and Tories will get along like a duck and water. They'll be absolutely, they're perfect partners ideologically to sort of block certain votes that are coming into the Scottish Parliament and to sort of promote certain votes that are coming in the Scottish Parliament. There is no splitting of the unionist vote, and I just know in my heart of hearts that we're going to have this tactical voting guide. We're going to have all these people saying, "Oh no, I didn't vote Reform here. Didn't vote Reform in the constituencies." You'll be asking people to stand them doing it and just we'll just end up in the same destructive cycle, the spiral that goes down and down and down, where it just our quality of life diminishes, where we get this back and fro between Labour and Tories. Up here, we've got the sort of the SNP in the mix, but they're going to capitalise. You better believe the SNP are going to capitalise on the death of Alex Salmond. You just know it's going to happen. So they're already putting in their budget this morning, it's our classic. We have to stop Westminster. We need to put this budget through to sort of what's the word I'm looking for? Just because Westminster's taking it all, we have to put it back in. You know what I mean? It's a lot of crap. We have to compensate for Westminster's austerity. It's a lot of crap. It's a lot of trash.
Yeah.
I mean, there's so much wasted. I hear on the radio as well. Oh, I think we're going to have to put the council tax up in Edinburgh, or we'll have to face very tough decisions in Edinburgh. You just know how much money is getting wasted in the council. Just got money wasted on all these rainbow initiatives, on all this stuff. It's insane. It's insane.
Well, just to go back to the tactical voting thing, this was suggested here. Curtice has his own opinion. He says, but Curtice stressed that it was, quote unquote, impossible to say who Reform would be taking seats from exactly because there were, quote, too many moving parts, close quote, given the unpopularity of the SNP, Labour and the Tories. So what he's suggesting there is, well, you're going to, maybe if you're splitting anything, you're going to be splitting everybody's vote. And I do think that's probably right. If Reform gets the right messaging, then you're going to take votes from that would have gone to all the others. And I wouldn't discount taking votes from former SNP people who are totally against their country being turned into a foreign country, and who are also very skeptical of the net zero thing. And the thing with net zero is people just believe it because the goggle box tells them to believe it. As soon as somebody gets on there and goes, this net zero thing's a load of pants, then everybody goes, oh, it's a load of pants then. Yeah. And you've changed the dynamic, and everybody believes something different. So it's easily done. We'll get to the top of the hour, so I need to draw this to a close. But any final thoughts there, Niall?
Well, I think the final thought has to be that the optimism is behind Reform, the momentum is behind Reform, they're gaining credibility day after day, week after week. They sort of they're new, but they're very, very vocal on what they want to do. They're very laser focused on what they want to do, and I think that given the current state of affairs in Scotland, the current state of affairs in political life in general, Reform has to be your vote in 2026 when this voting comes round. Even if I'm not even involved in it, if I collapsed and died, I would still be asking you to vote Reform on my tombstone. The thing is, it needs to happen. in order to sort of free Scotland from this political doom spiral that we're in.
Yes.
And you know, we have to have reform voices in the Scottish Parliament, because at the moment it's all script and theatre, none happens, and it's one, it's not exciting. Two, it's very, very dim, no having somebody that speaks your language in the Scottish Parliament. It really is.
Exactly, and that's why you need to get in anyway. If they only elect one man, then it has to be Niall Fraser, in my humble opinion.
Thanks very much.
And you can follow Niall, and please do, if you're on YouTube or if you're on X, is at youtube.com/ at the Niall Fraser Show, and that's NIALL and Fraser with an S, and on x.com / Niall Fraser 8, numeral 8, that is, and you'll get words of wisdom straight from the man's mouth. Niall, we must get you back on again. We'll be getting you on just as often as you want to come on, quite frankly, and you just tell us if you've got something to say. We'll get you heard. And so in the meantime, let me say good night to you.
Good night, and thanks for having me, Alistair, and thanks for all the good comments, and thanks again for doing your show in the first place, Alistair.
Yeah, it's a pleasure. Bye now. Bye. Great stuff. Niall is really, really good, isn't he? Just Paul says, vote positively for something, not just to stop one of the other old parties getting in. We've got wise words, indeed. And let me just bring up a point I wanted to read out that I saw somewhere. Christopher Glenn, working people are by nature conservative, small c. They know the value of things, including culture, identity, and belonging. These are the things that the political class want to rob them of. How true is that? Now, next week is going to be the beginning of our annual Yule Britannia Christmas Crowdfunder. We'll be beginning that on the 11th of December during the show at 7:30, and it will be going for 28 days, ending on the 8th of January in our first show of 2025. And so some of you give very generously at this time of the year, and so that will be your opportunity during that 28-day period from next Wednesday until the 8th of January. So we'll be beginning that next Wednesday, and the Yule Britannia Christmas Crowdfunder takes us usually through the first 6 months of the year, which enables us to keep the flag flying. In the meantime, we do have some things in our shop which we can flag up here. We have got our One Big Country. There it is, number 1 in the W.H. Smith's non-fiction section. At least I'd like that to have been the case. I cheekily put it up there, of course, and took a photograph of it. But here it is in reality, and you get this from Amazon.co.uk by simply searching for One Big Country, and it's available in paperback and in ebook. And it's only $9.99 in paperback, and volume 2 is going to be coming out soon as well. We've also got other things at our shop at A Force for Good, and we have got let's see, what other stuff have we got at our shop. We've got various things. We've got a laptop. We've got 2 laptops, in fact, 2 different laptop bags, I should say, laptop bags. We've got a Union Jack bedspread. We've got a Union Jack doorstop. These are all available at our shop, which is at aforceforgood.uk/shop-1, and you can get these cards there as well. They're not particularly Christmassy, but they can be used for Christmas cards. They're blank inside, but they're certainly very historically accurate. Good stuff. Well, I think that's everything that I need to say, other than the fact that we will be back next week. Any last minute comments that I need to read? No, I think that's it. It just remains for me to say, folks, God bless the United Kingdom and God save the King. See you next Wednesday.